My jealous sister tried to frame me for stealing our grandmother's heirloom necklace, but Mom caught her red-handed. It started over my grandmother's necklace. A delicate gold chain with a small emerald pendant. It wasn't the most expensive piece of jewelry, but it carried decades of family history. My grandmother had worn it on her wedding day, my mother had worn it on hers, and the plan was that it would stay in the family for generations. One Saturday, my mom hosted a family lunch at her house. My older sister, Claire, had brought her kids, and my aunt came along with hers. It was chaotic in the way only family gatherings can be, kids running around, people shouting over one another, and the smell of roast chicken wafting through the house. At some point during dessert, Mom announced she wanted to show the necklace to us, since my wedding was coming up. She brought out the little velvet box from her bedroom and opened it in the dining room. Everyone leaned in to admire it. "One day, this will be passed down to you," she said, looking directly at me. Claire frowned but said nothing. After everyone left that evening, my mom called me in a panic. The box was empty. The necklace was gone. The next day, I got another call, this time from Claire. Her voice was sharp. "Mom told me the necklace disappeared after dinner. She said you were the last one seen holding the box. Did you take it?" I was stunned. Of course not. Why would I steal something that Mom is already giving to me? Claire didn't buy it. Within hours, the rest of the family had heard. My aunt called to ask if it was true. My cousin sent me a text saying, "If you needed money, you could have just asked instead of taking Grandma's necklace." I couldn't believe it. Everyone seemed ready to assume the worst of me. That night, I replayed everything in my head. Yes, I had held the box. Mom had asked me to open it so everyone could see the necklace up close, but I had handed it back. I was sure of it. Still, the whispers continued. My mom sounded hesitant when I called her. "Sweetheart, I just don't know. Claire says she saw you slip something into your bag." That was it. I couldn't let this stand. I drove over to Mom's house the next morning. Claire was already there, sitting in the living room like she owned the place. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. "Let's settle this right now," I said. "Go through my bag, my car, my entire house if you want. You won't find anything." Claire smirked. "Thieves hide things well." I turned to my mom. "If we're being fair, maybe we should all have our bags checked. Everyone had a chance to take it." Claire's face paled. "Are you accusing me?" "I'm saying if you're going to accuse me without proof, then no one should be off limits." Mom hesitated, then nodded. "Claire, let me see your purse." Claire froze. For the first time, she looked nervous. "That's ridiculous, Mom. Why would I?" But Mom was already reaching for it. Claire pulled it back too quickly, and that was all the confirmation we needed. After a long silence, Mom said quietly, "Claire, give me the purse." Reluctantly, Claire handed it over. Mom opened the zipper, reached inside, and pulled out the velvet box. The necklace gleamed in her hand. Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Claire, how could you?" Claire stammered something about keeping it safe, about meaning to give it back, but her excuses sounded hollow. Finally, she broke down and admitted the truth. She hadn't been able to stand the idea that the necklace was being passed to me instead of her. "I've always done everything for this family," she cried. "And you just give it to her?" Mom's face hardened. "You tried to destroy your sister's reputation because of jealousy. Do you realize what you've done?" Claire just laughed. The sound hung in the air like broken glass, sharp and wrong, and Mom just stared at her with this look I'd never seen before, like she was seeing Claire for the first time, really seeing her. And the silence stretched so long that Claire's smile started to fade and she looked around the room realizing nobody else found this funny at all. Mom's voice came out barely above a whisper when she finally spoke, asking Claire how she could do this to her own sister, to our family. And that's when Claire's face hardened and she started going off about how she's the one with kids, the one who needs help, the one who deserves things, while Mom just kept shaking her head with tears streaming down her face. I grabbed the velvet box from Mom's trembling hands and told Claire I was done listening to her excuses, and when she lunged forward trying to snatch it back, I stepped away and said she'd lost any right to touch this necklace ever again. And Claire looked between Mom and me, realizing for once we were both united against her. She stood there for a moment, breathing hard, then stormed out, slamming the door so hard the pictures on the wall shook. And one of them, a photo of all of us at Christmas 5 years ago, actually fell and the glass cracked and Mom collapsed onto the couch like all the air had been let out of her. I sat next to her and we didn't talk for a while, just sat there processing what had just happened, the velvet box heavy in my hands, until finally Mom said she needed to call our aunt and correct the lies Claire had spread about me. Within an hour my phone started buzzing nonstop with messages from family members who'd heard Mom's version of events, some apologizing immediately for believing Claire's story, others asking for more details about what really happened, and a few staying suspiciously quiet like they weren't sure who to believe. My cousin sent this long text about how sorry she was for assuming the worst about me and how she should have known better since Claire had always been jealous of me even back when we were kids. That evening the family group chat exploded with drama when Claire posted this huge rant about being ambushed and betrayed by her own mother, claiming she was just keeping the necklace safe from me and that we were all overreacting to a simple misunderstanding. Several relatives started taking sides, my uncle saying we should all calm down and talk this through, while my other aunt posted that stealing is stealing no matter what excuses you make, and I realized this was far from over because Claire wasn't going to let this go quietly. Graham called me late that night after I texted him about everything that happened, and he listened to me vent for an hour about Claire and the necklace and all the family drama, then calmly suggested we needed to set clear boundaries with my family before our wedding because this kind of behavior couldn't continue. I knew he was right, but the thought of more confrontation made me exhausted, especially since the wedding was only 3 months away and we had so much to plan already without dealing with family feuds. The next morning Mom texted asking if she could keep the necklace at her house for safety until after the wedding, and I hesitated. Because part of me didn't trust anyone with it now, not even Mom, but I agreed since she had a better safe than I did, and we arranged for me to come over and document its condition first with photos and everything. At work on Monday I completely messed up a presentation because I was so distracted by everything that had happened over the weekend, mixing up slides and forgetting key points I'd practiced dozens of times, and my supervisor noticed I was off my game and pulled me aside afterward to check if everything was okay. I gave her a vague explanation about family drama without going into details, and she suggested I take the afternoon off to handle whatever was going on because she could tell I wasn't focused and it was affecting my work. My aunt called that afternoon while I was driving home, trying to smooth things over and saying Claire was going through a tough time financially with her divorce and the kids, and we should show some compassion and understanding. I told her that Claire's problems didn't give her the right to steal from family and destroy my reputation with lies, that she tried to turn everyone against me just because she was jealous about a necklace. The call ended with my aunt sighing heavily and saying she didn't want to take sides but that family should stick together, which felt like she was taking Claire's side anyway without actually saying it out loud. That evening after dinner I decided to drive over to Mom's house just to check on her since the whole thing with Claire had been so hard on her. When I pulled up to the house I saw Claire's car already parked in the driveway and my stomach dropped. I walked up to the front door and could hear voices inside before I even knocked. Through the window I could see Claire sitting on the couch crying while Mom sat next to her looking really torn about what to do. Claire was saying something about how everyone was against her now and Mom was just nodding and patting her shoulder. I stood there for a minute watching them and realized I couldn't walk in there right now without making things worse. I turned around and walked back to my car and sent Mom a text saying I'd stop by but would come back when Claire wasn't there. Mom texted back a few minutes later saying she understood and that she'd call me tomorrow. When I got home Graham was watching TV and I told him what happened and he just shook his head and said Claire knew exactly what she was doing. Later that night I was sitting at the kitchen table looking at the velvet box Mom had given me with the necklace inside. I opened it and looked at the necklace more closely, and that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There was a small scuff mark on the side of the box that definitely wasn't there before. The more I looked at it the more sick I felt thinking about Claire taking our grandmother's necklace to some random pawn shop or jewelry store to try to sell it. Graham came over and looked at it too and said it looked like someone had dropped it or scraped it against something. The next morning Graham suggested we should check with jewelry stores in the area to see if anyone matching Claire's description had come in trying to sell an emerald necklace. He said he'd drive me around on Saturday to ask questions at different shops, and I was really grateful he was being so practical about this whole mess. We sat down and made a list of every jewelry store and pawn shop within a reasonable driving distance from Claire's house and Mom's house. Saturday morning we started early and went to the first shop on our list, but nobody there remembered seeing anyone like Claire. The second shop was the same story and I was starting to think this was a waste of time. At the third shop though things changed when I showed the guy behind the counter a photo of Claire from my phone. His name tag said Dante and he immediately nodded and said a woman who looked just like her had come in last week. He said she'd asked about selling an emerald necklace, but left when he told her they'd need documentation proving she owned it. My suspicions were confirmed and I asked Dante if he could write down everything he remembered about her visit. He grabbed a piece of paper and wrote down the date and time she'd come in and what she'd said about the necklace. That evening my phone buzzed with a text from Claire, and it was the first time she'd contacted me directly since the whole confrontation at Mom's house. She was demanding that I apologize for humiliating her in front of Mom and claiming I'd ruined her relationship with our mother and turned the whole family against her. I read the message 3 times and then took a screenshot of it without responding and added it to the folder on my phone where I was keeping all the evidence of what she'd done. Graham saw me doing it and said it was smart to document everything in case we needed it later. A few days later Mom called and suggested we all sit down with a mediator to work through this as a family. She said she'd found a therapist named Calvin Harmon who specialized in family conflicts and wanted to schedule a session for all 3 of us. I agreed even though I really doubted it would work because I knew Mom needed to at least try to fix things between us. The first mediation session was scheduled for Tuesday afternoon at Calvin's office downtown. Mom and I got there early and sat in the waiting room, but Claire never showed up. Calvin came out after waiting 15 minutes past the appointment time and said we could still use the session to talk about boundaries and healthy family dynamics. We spent the hour talking about how Mom had always tried to keep the peace between Claire and me even when it meant ignoring Claire's behavior over the years. Mom admitted she felt guilty about not addressing the jealousy issues when we were younger and how maybe that contributed to what happened now. After the failed mediation Mom and I went for coffee at a place nearby and she opened up more about Claire's situation. She told me Claire had been struggling with debt and that her marriage was having problems, which might explain why she was so desperate, but didn't excuse what she did. I reminded Mom that Claire had made her own choices and needed to face the consequences of trying to steal from family and then lying about it. Mom nodded, but I could see she was still struggling with the whole situation. That night I got a text from Dante saying he'd found some paperwork from when Claire had visited his store. He said she'd actually started filling out an appraisal request form before changing her mind and leaving. He couldn't share the actual form because of privacy laws, but he confirmed the date and time matched exactly when the necklace went missing from Mom's house. The next evening Graham and I sat on the couch discussing whether we should file a police report about the theft and attempted fraud. We talked about how it might affect our upcoming wedding and whether we wanted that kind of drama, but Graham pointed out that family crimes often go unreported, which just enables more bad behavior in the future. He said he'd support whatever I decided, but thought Claire needed to face some real consequences for what she'd done. Thursday at work dragged on until lunch when Noelle Warner from accounting caught me in the break room staring at my untouched sandwich. She sat down across from me and asked what was wrong since I'd been distracted all week. I told her everything about the necklace and Claire's lies and how everyone believed her at first. Noelle shook her head and pointed out this wasn't the first time my family expected me to be the bigger person while Claire never faced real consequences. She said from an outsider's view the whole dynamic looked toxic and unfair. Her words stuck with me as I went back to my desk. That evening Mom called and mentioned something that made my stomach drop. She'd actually told our aunt months ago that I'd be getting the necklace for my wedding. The whole family knew about the plan before Claire even started her lies. This meant everyone who jumped to believe Claire's story already knew Mom planned to give me the necklace. Claire must have been angry about it for months before she finally snapped and took it. Friday night while scrolling through social media I saw Claire had posted something vague but clearly aimed at me. She wrote about family members who value objects over relationships and how some people are too materialistic to understand real love. Several cousins commented with hearts and supportive messages not knowing what really happened. My fingers hovered over the keyboard wanting to set the record straight but I closed the app instead. Fighting on social media would just make things worse. Instead I opened my laptop and typed out a simple message with just the facts. The necklace was stolen from Mom's house and found in Claire's purse where she admitted taking it out of jealousy. I sent it to a small group of close relatives who deserved to know the truth. Within an hour my phone started buzzing with responses. Most were shocked and apologetic for believing Claire's lies without hearing my side. My cousin who'd accused me of needing money sent a long apology saying she felt terrible. But then my aunt replied to the group message defending Claire. She said I shouldn't air family business and that Claire was suffering enough already. I typed back that Claire created this whole situation and I wouldn't stay silent while she played victim. My aunt shot back that she wouldn't choose sides, which felt like she already had. Saturday evening Graham was watching TV when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Claire trying to reach him directly since I'd blocked her everywhere. She wrote that I was being unreasonable and asked him to talk sense into me about the whole situation. Graham showed me the messages right away and blocked her number without responding. We sat on the couch and talked for over an hour about setting boundaries with my family after we got married. Graham said he supported me completely, but wouldn't tolerate anyone trying to manipulate our relationship like Claire just did. We agreed that any future family drama would be handled as a team with neither of us letting them divide us. The following week Calvin scheduled another mediation session and surprisingly Claire actually showed up this time. She walked in already defensive with her arms crossed and wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. Calvin tried to guide the conversation toward understanding and resolution but Claire kept deflecting everything back to her money problems. When Calvin pressed her about actually stealing the necklace she finally admitted feeling desperate and jealous but still tried to minimize what she'd done. She said it wasn't really stealing since it was staying in the family anyway. Mom pulled out some papers from her purse and mentioned she needed to file insurance documentation about the attempted theft. Claire's face went white and she started begging Mom not to create any official record of what happened. Mom said the insurance company required it for their files since she'd already reported the necklace missing initially. This was the first time I'd seen Mom really stand firm against Claire's tears and manipulation. Claire kept saying an insurance claim would ruin her life but Mom just shook her head. Calvin suggested we take a break to calm down and when we came back I had an idea. I proposed that we delay any transfer of the necklace until after my wedding to avoid more drama right now. Mom nodded and said that made sense given everything that had happened recently. Even Claire seemed relieved to stop talking about it for now though her face stayed angry. Calvin wrote down that we'd agreed to table the necklace discussion as a reasonable boundary under the circumstances. 2 weeks before my wedding, my phone buzzed with a text from Claire while I was picking up my dress from the tailor. She wanted to know if she was still invited to be in the bridal party. I stared at the message for a full minute before typing back that she was lucky to still be invited as a guest. She had been my maid of honor before the theft, but I'd removed her right away. Her response came fast with angry emojis and accusations that I was being unfair. I put my phone on silent and focused on the final fitting. The seamstress pinned the hem while I tried not to think about Claire's messages piling up. Later that evening, Mom called while I was going through RSVPs with Graham. Her voice sounded tired as she explained that Claire was now saying she wouldn't come to the wedding if she couldn't be in the bridal party. I told Mom that was Claire's choice to make. Mom sighed and said she understood my position even though it hurt to see the family divided. Graham squeezed my hand as I hung up. The next morning brought more drama when I was finalizing the seating chart at the venue. The wedding coordinator mentioned my aunt had called asking about ceremony arrangements for Claire. I learned my aunt was threatening not to attend if Claire wasn't included as a bridesmaid. Graham reminded me that anyone who boycotted our wedding over this was showing where their priorities really were. We spent the next hour revising the seating chart to account for potentially empty chairs. 3 tables needed adjusting if my aunt's side of the family decided not to come. The coordinator assured us she'd seen worse family drama and could handle whatever happened. That afternoon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was Dante from the jewelry shop where Claire had tried to sell the necklace months ago. He offered to write a statement about Claire's visit if I needed it for legal or insurance purposes. I thanked him and saved his contact information in case we needed it later. He mentioned he saw family jewelry disputes more often than people would think. His shop kept detailed records of attempted sales for exactly these situations. I filed his email with the other documentation we'd been collecting. 2 days later, the insurance adjuster called to schedule statements from Mom and me about the theft incident. She explained that Claire would need to be notified since she was named in the report. Mom volunteered to handle telling Claire to avoid more direct conflict between us. The adjuster said the process would take several weeks, but having Dante's potential statement would help. I spent an hour on the phone giving my detailed account of everything that had happened. Mom called later to say Claire had screamed at her about the insurance claim. A week before the wedding, I was addressing thank you cards when an email from Claire popped up. She acknowledged that jealousy had clouded her judgment and said she was sorry, but the apology came with 3 paragraphs of excuses about her struggles and financial problems. She wanted immediate forgiveness and to move forward like nothing had happened. I saved the email without responding because I needed time to figure out if this was real accountability or just manipulation. Graham read it and pointed out how she still blamed everyone else for her choices. My bridal shower happened 2 days later at Noelle's house without Claire there. Some relatives made her absence awkwardly obvious with pointed questions about where she was. Noelle helped deflect the worst comments by changing subjects and keeping activities moving. Graham's mother made a comment about being proud to welcome me to their drama-free family. The shade wasn't subtle, but I appreciated her support. My cousin kept asking if Claire would be at the wedding until Noelle pulled her aside. The gifts were lovely and everyone seemed to have a good time despite the elephant in the room. 3 days later, I was at my bachelorette party venue when security called me to the front. Claire stood there claiming she just wanted to wish me well before the wedding. My friends immediately formed a protective barrier while I told her she needed to leave. She started making a scene about being excluded from everything and how unfair I was being. The venue manager came over when she raised her voice and asked if there was a problem. Claire kept arguing until he said he'd call the police if she didn't leave immediately. She finally stormed out, but not before shouting that I'd ruined our family. My friends spent the rest of the night making sure I was okay and keeping the mood light. The next morning, Mom called asking one more time if there was any way Claire could attend the wedding without causing problems. I told her Claire could come as a guest if she agreed to specific boundaries in writing. No speeches, no approaching the wedding party, and absolutely no drama or she'd be removed. Mom promised to handle getting Claire's agreement to these terms. I made a list of the conditions and emailed them to Mom to forward. Within hours, Mom called back saying Claire agreed to the wedding attendance conditions, but she refused to put anything in writing about apologizing publicly for the theft. She claimed that would be humiliating and unnecessary since family already knew what happened. I decided to accept this partial victory since having her there might keep some peace. Graham wasn't happy about it but arranged for his cousin to act as informal security during the reception. His cousin was a bouncer at a local club and knew how to handle difficult people quietly. We gave him Claire's photo and told him to watch for any signs of trouble. The wedding was now days away and I just wanted to get through it without more family drama. The rehearsal dinner came 2 nights later at a small Italian place Graham's parents had picked out. I was helping arrange name cards when I saw Claire walk in with her kids, taking a table way in the back without saying hello to anyone. She kept her head down but I felt her watching me every time I moved around the room. Graham squeezed my hand and whispered that his cousin was already keeping an eye on things. The dinner started smoothly with Graham's dad making jokes about how he finally got another son after raising 3 daughters. People were laughing and passing bread around when Claire's youngest suddenly stood up on his chair. "Why isn't Mommy in the wedding?" he asked loud enough that everyone stopped talking. The whole room went quiet and I saw Claire's face turn bright red as she pulled him back down. Mom jumped up right away with a plate of cookies she'd somehow hidden nearby and started handing them out to all the kids, making a big show of letting them pick their favorites first. Claire grabbed her purse like she was about to leave but then sat back down when her kids started eating. Mom came over later and told me Claire had almost walked out 3 times, but stayed because the kids were having fun with their cousins. I turned my attention back to Graham's family who were telling embarrassing stories about his college years while his sisters added even worse details. The wedding morning arrived gray and drizzly, which Mom said was good luck in some cultures. I stood in front of the mirror holding the velvet box with the necklace inside, turning it over in my hands. The emerald caught the light but all I could think about was Claire trying to frame me and all the family members who'd believed her lies without question. I closed the box and handed it to Mom who nodded and said she'd put it in her safe deposit box after the ceremony. The church filled up slowly with Graham's side packed and several obvious gaps on mine where Claire's supporters had chosen not to come. Claire sat in the very last row with her kids who started squirming before the music even began. During the vows her oldest dropped a handful of crayons that rolled loudly across the wooden floor. Graham never stopped looking at me though, and when we kissed the whole church erupted except for that back corner. At the reception I noticed Claire's table was already empty before we'd even cut the cake. Graham's cousin confirmed she'd left right after dinner without talking to anyone, which honestly felt like the best wedding gift she could have given me. Mom stood up for her speech during the toasts and talked about watching me grow from a stubborn toddler who insisted on wearing rain boots to church into the strong woman standing before her. She talked about family being the people who choose to stand by you when things get hard and how proud she was that I'd found that in Graham. Her voice cracked when she mentioned learning to let go of old hurts to make room for new joy. Several people came up afterward to say how touching it was not knowing she was really talking about Claire and everything that had happened. After the last dance, Mom pulled me aside and handed me an envelope with my name written in her careful handwriting. Inside was a long letter about Grandma buying the necklace with her first paycheck as a nurse and how she'd worn it the day she met Grandpa at a church social. Mom wrote about her own wedding day and how Grandma had fastened it around her neck with tears in her eyes. She said Grandma would want it to bring joy, not pain, and that we'd figure out what to do with it when emotions weren't so raw. I hugged her tight, feeling closer than we'd been in months. 2 weeks after the honeymoon, the insurance adjuster called to say they still hadn't received Claire's statement about finding the necklace. He said they could process the claim without it, but it would note her lack of cooperation in the official report. Mom decided to let them handle it however they needed rather than calling Claire and starting another fight. That night my phone buzzed with a text from Claire at almost midnight. She claimed her kids kept asking why I didn't visit anymore and that I was turning them against her with my grudge. She demanded I fix things and stop punishing innocent children for adult problems. I read it 3 times then blocked her number, knowing some relationships just can't be fixed no matter how much you want them to be. Graham found me a therapist through a coworker who specialized in family trauma and toxic relationships. The first session I just cried while she handed me tissues and assured me this was normal. Graham came to some sessions to learn what to say when I got overwhelmed by everything. We worked out a plan for handling holidays and family events with limited contact for the next 6 months while I figured out my boundaries. Mom and I met for coffee a month later to talk about the necklace. We both agreed it should stay locked away for at least a year until things settled down. Mom mentioned she'd started updating her will to be very specific about who got what family heirloom so there couldn't be any confusion or fighting later. The necklace felt less important now than the boundaries we were finally learning to build. She showed me the draft where everything was spelled out clearly, including a note that items were to go to who she designated regardless of anyone's feelings about fairness. 3 months after the wedding, Mom called me on a Tuesday afternoon while I was sorting through wedding thank you cards. She sounded tired when she told me Claire had reached out saying she was getting divorced and needed family support. Mom didn't push me to get involved or make me feel guilty about staying away. She just shared the information and let me decide what to do with it. I thought about it for 2 days before texting Mom that she could tell Claire I wished her well but wasn't ready for direct contact. Mom texted back a simple thumbs up emoji and didn't bring it up again unless I asked. When Thanksgiving rolled around, Graham and I decided to host at our place for the first time. We only invited the family members who had supported us through the wedding drama, which meant a much smaller group than usual. My aunt came with her kids, 2 of my cousins who had defended me showed up and Mom came alone. The turkey was slightly dry and I forgot to make the green bean casserole, but nobody complained. Everyone helped with dishes and we played board games after dinner instead of watching football. Mom seemed lighter without having to manage everyone's feelings and referee between family members. She actually laughed at Graham's terrible dad jokes and helped me frost the store-bought pumpkin pie when I admitted I'd run out of time to bake. The whole day felt peaceful in a way our family gatherings never had before. As December came around, Mom mentioned during one of our weekly coffee dates that Claire had moved in with a friend from her book club. She started to tell me more details but stopped herself and asked if I wanted to know. I appreciated her asking first and told her I was glad Claire had somewhere to go but didn't need updates. Mom nodded and changed the subject to her new quilting class. A few weeks later she let slip that Claire had started therapy but caught herself and apologized for bringing it up. I told her it was fine and that I hoped the therapy helped, but I still wasn't ready to rebuild our relationship. Mom respected that boundary and stopped mentioning Claire unless I specifically asked, which I rarely did. Life settled into a new rhythm with our smaller family circle. Sunday dinners happened at Mom's house with just me, Graham, and sometimes my aunt. Holiday cards came from fewer relatives, but the ones we got felt genuine. The family group chat stayed quiet except for birthday wishes and major announcements. I moved the necklace from our house safe to a bank safety deposit box where it sits in its velvet box waiting for some future day when it might mean love instead of betrayal. Maybe someday I'll have a daughter who can wear it without knowing its complicated history, or maybe it'll stay locked away forever. Some breaks in families heal into stronger bonds but others just scar over differently and I'm learning that's okay too.